Imagine this. The President of the United States boards Air Force One in front of cameras. The world sees him get on the plane. Journalists board. White House staff board. Everyone believes the president is about to leave Turkey. But there was one problem. Donald Trump wasn't actually on that plane. According to reporting from the Washington Post and Reuters, Trump was secretly moved onto a smaller military aircraft after U.S. security officials received what they considered a credible and imminent threat. And the way they did it sounds almost like something from a spy movie. Trump was moved off the presidential aircraft using an airport catering truck. The plane everyone believed he was on then took off as a decoy. And now, weeks later, we're learning just how elaborate that operation was, and why Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is demanding answers from the Trump administration. The incident happened on July 8th, after Trump attended the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey. Trump had arrived in Turkey aboard a newer Boeing 747-8 aircraft provided by Qatar for use as Air Force One. But when it was time to leave, Trump publicly indicated that he would fly part of the journey on the older blue and white Air Force One. That is exactly what cameras captured. Trump arrived at the airport. He boarded the older presidential aircraft. He waved, and from the outside, everything looked completely normal. But behind the scenes, U.S. security officials had made a very different plan. According to reporting, Trump and a small group of aides were secretly transferred from the large presidential aircraft to a smaller C-32A military jet. And they didn't simply walk across the tarmac. They used an airport catering truck. The truck was positioned beside the aircraft, allowing Trump to leave without attracting attention from the journalists and other people boarding the plane. Think about what that means. The aircraft looked like Air Force One. The press corps was aboard. White House staff were aboard. Senior officials were aboard. And the plane actually departed Turkey. But the president wasn't on it. The aircraft was effectively being used as a decoy. Reuters reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent remained aboard that flight, along with White House staff and the traveling press corps. That raises an obvious question. Why would the United States deliberately allow people to believe the president was on a plane when he wasn't? Because if an adversary is tracking the president's movements, knowing exactly which aircraft contains the president can create a serious vulnerability. By separating Trump from the aircraft everyone expected him to use, U.S. security officials could make his actual location much harder to determine. Now we get to the most serious part of the story. What triggered all of this? According to Reuters, the Secret Service received intelligence indicating that the presidential aircraft could potentially be targeted by a shoulder-fired missile. The source, who spoke to Reuters, said the threat emerged on the final day of Trump's NATO summit visit and was considered credible and imminent. That does not mean an attack was definitely going to happen. In fact, another source told Reuters there was no clear operational plan from hostile actors to execute the attack. There was an apparent intent or threat, but not necessarily a confirmed attack plan. And that distinction matters, because this story is not about saying that an Iranian missile was definitely fired at Trump's plane. It wasn't. It's about U.S. security officials receiving intelligence serious enough that they decided they could not take the risk. For weeks, the public didn't know the full story. Then Trump was asked about the aircraft switch, and he confirmed it. Trump said the decision came from the Secret Service and the military. His message was essentially, if the people responsible for protecting the president tell him to take another aircraft, he follows their instructions. Trump also suggested that the aircraft he actually flew on may have faced greater risk, although he did not publicly provide evidence for that assessment. That confirmation changed the story. What had initially been a report based on sources and investigative reporting was now something the president himself acknowledged. But another question immediately emerged. How many people in the U.S. government actually knew about this? Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is demanding that the Trump administration brief Congress on the operation. Schumer says Congress was kept in the dark and that lawmakers learned about the serious security threat through media reports. And this isn't simply about curiosity. Schumer and other lawmakers are asking questions about intelligence, presidential security, and how information about a potential threat was handled. The Washington Post reports that Schumer himself was not briefed. Neither was Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, according to his office. Both are members of the so-called Gang of Eight, a group of congressional leaders who traditionally receive briefings on some of the government's most sensitive intelligence. But there is an important distinction here. There is no general law requiring the White House to tell Congress exactly where the president is at every moment.